Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Lauren and this video is part of my top sewing tips series on my YouTube channel and on my blog as well. And in this video, I'm going to be talking to you all about interfacing and using it in your home dressmaking projects. And if you do like to sew your own clothes at home and use the nice independent sewing patterns that are out there, or other sewing patterns too, of course, then it's going to be not too long at all before you come across the use of interfacing. So it's good to know a little bit more background information about it. So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about what it actually is and when and why you should use it and the different characteristics that it might have as well. So you've probably heard of fusible or non-fusible, woven, non-woven. You can get different colours, you can get different thicknesses. So I'm going to cover all of that. And then at the end of the video, I'll also show you how you can incorporate it and use it into your projects as well. So first of all, what actually is interfacing? So basically it's a type of fabric that's treated with a stiffener or will add form and slight stiffness and structure to your garments, and it will be used in key parts of garments like shirt collars, for example, or button band or cuff, or a waistband on a pair of trousers or a skirt. And if your pattern calls for it, you should 100% definitely use it. If you don't use it and the pattern has been designed to be used with it, then you'll find that the garment just sort of bags and stretches out and just loses its kind of form and structure and doesn't really look that good after a period of time. It might also not really fit you anymore either, because it's the main fabric's just going to stretch out. So if your pattern says to use interfacing, definitely do use it. So the first characteristic that I want to talk to you about is fusible and non-fusible interfacing. So fusible interfacing basically comes with a heat activated glue on the back of it, on one side, and when that glue is heated up with the iron, it melts and then it sticks to the fabric. So you'll know if the interfacing is fusible or not, because when you feel it, one side commonly feels rough and the other side smooth, so the rough side has the glue on it. And what you might also notice is that the rough side kind of glistens in the light a little bit more, like the light catches it. It might almost look sort of sparkly. So that's how you know the glue is on that side as well. And then the non-fusible or sew in interfacing is, in terms of the sort of thing that it's made from, it's the same as the fusible stuff, it just doesn't have that heat activated glue on it. So the only way it's actually held into your garment is through stitches, so it needs to be sewn on just like another layer of fabric as part of your garment. And what it does is that will still provide that form and structure, but without stiffening the fabric as much, because it's not actually attached. So it tends to be more of a traditional way to put interfacing in, or more of a couture way to do it, or it might be on certain types of fabrics that you have to use the sew-in or the non-fusible one as well. So velvet, for example, because it's got that kind of a furry texture, if you put a lot of pressure on that with the iron, it's going to spoil the main fabric. Or it might be that your main fabric's quite sensitive to heat, so like a metallic-y fabric or sequins, you know, you can't really iron the fabric at the heat required to melt the fusible interfacing, so you have to use the sew-in. Or if your fabric has a really loose weave to it, or quite an open weave, you know, an extreme example of that would be like a lace, for example, then you would want to use the sew-in interfacing, because the glue from the fusible interfacing could sort of seep through and then just make the main fabric not look as good. So the most common type that you will come across and that you'll likely use if you're just making clothes for yourself at home is the fusible one. It's really readily available and it's really quick and easy to use too, but of course you can't, there's always options, and you can get the non-fusible or sew-in interfacing as well. So the next characteristic that you want to consider is what the interfacing is actually made of, the nature of it. So it might be that it is a knit interfacing. So if you're using a stretchy or a jersey fabric and your pattern calls for interfacing, then it's good to make sure that the interfacing you use is a knit interfacing as well, so that it can stretch with your fabric. And again, that might be fusible or it might be non-fusible. To be honest, you don't really come across that often, and most garments and patterns that are made with that type of fabric are usually finished off in another way at the neckline, you know, like a neckband, for example, that you don't need the knit interfacing, but it does exist, it is out there. If you ever come across it, then you can get it. The other types of sort of base cloth that it's made from is that it might be woven interfacing, so it's either going to be woven or non-woven. So if it's woven, it's probably going to be made from cotton, or it might even be a polycotton, and it's just going to be like any other woven fabric. It's going to have a selvage, which means it's going to have a grain line. So when you come to cut out your pattern pieces with that interfacing, make sure you're cutting it out on the straight grain of the pattern. And then with the non-woven interfacing, the sort of fibres, or like the thing that non-woven interfacing is made from, they're all just kind of bonded together. So it doesn't have a grain line. It's just like kind of sheet of, I don't know, it kind of reminds me almost like a sheet of paper, but obviously it's not like paper, because you can wash it and stuff. But a bit like that, you don't have to cut that out on a specific grain line or whatever, and that's probably the most common one to come across. In terms of choosing woven over non-woven interfacing, it might be a personal preference thing, so you might just prefer to just use woven. It might be a cost thing. Non-woven interfacing tends to be cheaper, or it might be the context that you're actually using it in. So for example, I have put fusible interfacing over the whole of a coat. So before I made a coat, and before I cut my coat pieces out of the woolen fabric that I was using, I interfaced the whole thing, and that was because I wanted to provide structure and support to the fabric so that the coat would last longer and it wouldn't stretch out. And I used woven interfacing for that, just so that it would mean that the main fabric could still sort of move around in a more normal way. When you use non-fusible interfacing, it does make it stiffer. But for smaller areas like waistbands or button bands or collars, then that's what I would use non-fusible for that. So yeah, it might be a personal preference thing, but there's not like a strict right or wrong. You're going to find camps for both, but you can kind of use your judgment and what you can find as well. And generally, whatever you use is going to be okay as long as you just use it. If your pattern says to use it, then just use it. Then the next characteristic is the colour. So generally, you just only really get interfacing, whatever kind it is, in either a white or a charcoal or a black. They just come in those two colours. So obviously, it's best to match the shade of interfacing you've got to the shade of your fabric. If you're not sure whether it should be light or dark, then it might just depend on the thickness of your fabric and whether it's going to show through. And really, you would want to do a test patch, because sometimes if, say, the fabric was slightly lighter in colour, the main fabric, and you put a darker interfacing on it, it could just change the shade of the colour a little bit. So always just check that out if you're unsure. I tend to just use white, to be honest, for most stuff, but it does depend on what I'm sewing. So yeah, you can just sort of use your judgment and test it if you're not sure before you actually go ahead and iron it onto your garment. So the next characteristic is the weight, or the thickness of it. And it can come in a few different types of weight. So it might be really quite lightweight, it might be medium weight, or it might be firm. And you really want to match the weight or the thickness of your interfacing to the fabric that you've got. So for example, my blouse that I've got on just now is made from a viscose. It's very lightweight, it's very floppy and flimsy, so I have used a lightweight interfacing to put that on. If I'd used anything thicker, it would just feel too sort of stiff and rigid around the collar. So I do have interfacing in my collar and my collar stand, but you can see it's still quite pliable, it still moves around a lot, but it does have that structure in there. If you're ever unsure, it's probably better to err on the side of the lighter weight. If you're not sure whether you should go for lightweight or medium weight, better to probably err on the lighter weight side, just because if you do use one that's too stiff, it can just really change the look and feel of a garment and just make it quite stiff when you maybe don't want to do that. It's nice if your clothes are able to sort of move and kind of be as natural as possible, really. The firm interfacing, in terms of dressmaking and just making your own clothes at home, you're probably not going to come across the need to use firm interfacing that often, to be honest. It really is pretty firm, and it's going to be better for things like bags or little purses or something rather than in garments. But it might just depend. I'm sure there probably is a garment out there that needs it, but on the whole, I would say a medium weight or a lightweight interfacing is going to be fine. So yeah, for the viscose, the lightweight, or if it's a cotton lawn, or a double gauze, you know, quite a floppy, lightweight fabric, or a rayon or modal, that kind of thing, then lightweight's going to be better. The medium weight one's good for more structured fabrics that are more structured, so like a denim or a cotton poplin, you know, that sort of thicker weight cotton, or a kind of thicker weight linen, for example. So yeah, it's good just to kind of match your interfacing to the weight of fabric as much as possible. So in terms of actually applying it onto your fabric, if you're using the fusible stuff, then you want to cut the fusible interfacing out to the same, use your pattern pieces to cut it out, just as you would with your main fabric, and your pattern will typically tell you where you need to apply it onto the pattern pieces. So for example, this is a shirt, the Closet Case Patterns Cali shirt that I made recently, and interfacing's used in quite a few parts of this, so it's got this diagram and it tells you where you need to put the interfacing. And then when you come to iron it on, you want to make sure that the wrong side of your fabric is facing up. So you've got your main fabric lying in the ironing board, the wrong side's facing up, and then you place your interfacing down with the sticky side facing down, so it's touching the back of the fabric. Try to line it up as much as possible. Now, if you're quite precious over the surface of your ironing board, you might want to put a pressing cloth underneath, because sometimes things can move a tiny little bit, and some of the glue from the interfacing can then go onto the cover of your ironing board. I'm a bit lazy, to be honest, and I don't do that, but you totally could if you wanted to protect it. It's probably best practice to put a pressing cloth over. And then again, it's best practice to put a pressing cloth over the top of that before you actually iron it on. Again, just to protect the surface of your iron, really. Admittedly, I don't do this all the time. I know that I should. I mean, it's one of those things that you just know that you should, but you know, I get lazy sometimes, what can I say? So I guess it's up to you really, whether you want to sort of be as particular as that or not. But basically, you don't want to move the iron around too much when you're fusing the interfacing on, because it can make things slip a little bit. So you're better to sort of lift the iron up and kind of place it down and then just hold it still. Usually it takes about 8 to 10 seconds in my experience for it to stick, and then just move it along, do the same thing again, and then just check that it's stuck by almost waiting for it to cool a little bit, because it will be really hot once you take the iron off initially. Wait for it to cool, and then almost like try to see if you can peel it off, and you shouldn't be able to. If it's quite easy to peel the interfacing off, your iron's probably not been hot enough, and you just need to turn the heat up and then iron it again. Generally, it's better to have it on a cooler setting, the iron, to start with, and see if it's sticking, and then turn the heat up in the iron as needed to actually make it melt. I've done it more so with the lightweight interfacings, because they're really quite flimsy and very not fragile, but they're very kind of delicate, and if the iron's too hot, they can kind of shrivel up a little bit and sort of just go all kind of funny. So it is better to have the iron on the cooler side and turn it up as you need to. But yeah, it's as simple as that to put it on. That's obviously the fusible stuff. If it is the sew-in stuff, then really you're just looking at, it might be that you're basting it around the edges within the seam allowance, or you're just sort of sandwiching it between some layers when you sew stuff together. Your pattern's likely to tell you that, but you're just going to be using stitches to attach it onto your fabric as needed. So I hope you found that useful, and it's just given you a bit more context into using interfacings for your home dressmaking projects. If you've got any comments or questions, then of course just leave them below and I will try to answer them as best I can. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, just remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video. I've got more coming up in this series, and then I've got more of my other kinds of videos that I do as well. I've got a new fabrics one coming very soon too, which I know is always highly anticipated. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.